Welcome in, everyone, to a new episode of the Batfoot Podcast. My name is Damon here with David and Matt. We got a jam-packed episode. A couple big-time free agents have signed. We have a couple big trades that have happened. Before we get to all of this stuff, David, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Hope everyone's getting your holiday shopping done. It's getting crazy out there, so braving the crowds and the cold weather, but enjoying the Christmas lights, Christmas trees, everything. It's nice, and after the winter meetings, all the baseball movement, it's been a little bit of a crazy week between those two things. So I hope you guys are also getting ready to have a good holiday. And how you doing, Matt?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad you mentioned holiday shopping because I haven't done enough of it yet. And that's going to be on the docket this weekend, I guess. But yeah, everything's going good here. The baseball craziness happening, all the other off-season sports stuff. And I want to mention, I send my condolences to, to the Mississippi State fans and people, and with Mike Leach being currently in critical condition, and it doesn't sound good. Just want to say a quick word on that. Just hope they all heal quickly, and it doesn't sound like a good situation. So I wanted to mention it.
All right, well, let's go ahead and just jump right into the small stuff. David, we'll go ahead and have you start with these first three and kind of just wrap it up. We have the Nationals have signed Trevor Williams to a 2-year, $13 million deal. And then the Pirates made a couple moves, signing two pitchers, one being Vince Velasquez for a 1 year at $3.15 million deal, and then relief pitcher Harlan Garcia on a 1 year deal that we don't know the exact terms on.
I want to say Harlan Garcia is on a minor league deal or league minimum, something like that. But either way, the Trevor Williams is a good name. He was in the Javi Baez trade to the Mets for Pete Crow Armstrong. And he pitched a year and a half there, pitched pretty well, finally gets to secure some money. And, he'll be one of those guys that the Nats look to flip at the deadline this year. I think he'll probably be one of those good innings eater pitchers. He's pretty solid. He's just like a little bit above average, but he was a really good guy when he was on the Cubs. So I'm glad Trevor Williams did get paid there, and Vince Velasquez coming off of the Phillies, a bit of a reclamation for the Pirates. They'll look to probably flip him as well. And Harlan Garcia, lefty reliever, he might actually be a little bit dangerous. The Pirates bullpen tends to kind of amp it up in the middle of the season, but like I said, these are moves that are just kind of fringe moves, and ultimately don't move the needle much for the Pirates, but will be some names I think we could revisit come July next year.
Yeah, real briefly, Harlan Garcia is a guy that he's one of those guys that could end up being like one of those weird lefties that has a really good season and gets traded for something that's not nothing. He seems to be a type of guy who could have something like that happen. So that's probably a good move for the Pirates.
Yeah, he's had pretty strong for last seasons. But let's go ahead and jump over to the AL Central, and we had the Cleveland Guardians sign first baseman Josh Bell to a 2-year, $33 million deal, which has an opt-out after year one. Matt, why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, Josh Bell is a guy who he's had a couple of really good seasons in the last 3 years. He had the breakout in 2019 with the Pirates. The last 2 years he's been a pretty solid first baseman, probably more of a first base / DH guy. His defense is really, really, really bad at first, but 123 WRC plus in 2022 between Washington and San Diego. A 119 WRC plus in 2021 with Washington. Really solid player, good power bat. His strikeout rates have come down a lot throughout his career. He's a good contact hitter. He walks a good bit, good plate discipline guy. I think he'll fit in really well in that lineup. They seem to prioritize that type of thing, and they did need another bat, especially a guy like a first base type. So good for Cleveland on getting a guy who has some pretty good upside there, and good for them on spending a little bit of money and at least trying to have a good free agency, because that's a team that was in the playoffs and is notorious for spending absolutely nothing. And I mean 16.5 million AAV is not nothing. So good for Cleveland on spending a little bit.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the Texas Rangers signing Cy Heaney to a 2-year, $25 million deal. Can be up to $37 million with incentives, and he also has an opt-out. David, why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, so Andrew Heaney's a good example of the type of guy that these middling teams are trying to hit high on. Damian called him Cy Heaney because our joke was once he signed with the Dodgers last year, he would probably explode. He's the kind of guy whose baseball reference page is all red dots all to the right. So this is the kind of guy who could have a very good year for Texas, and it's the kind of move that Texas has to be really aggressive with. I mean, this is a really high annual average value deal with a lot of incentives. I mean, $12 million in incentives, and those are Cy Young votes and 20 wins and stuff like that for Heaney, and they want him to come in and start. They want him to come in and pair up with DeGrom and have nasty stuff. And I think bringing over the Dodgers know-how that he found, because his stuff had ticked up with the Dodgers. He just had gotten injured. If he can stay healthy, this is one of those moves that could very well impact that AL West race, which is going to be one of the wild races of the year. What with the Astros and Mariners also making moves all offseason so far.
Yeah, I want to add one thing on that. The Rangers, after signing DeGrom, they really need to lengthen their rotation now, and that's going to give them length in their rotation, give them some depth. That's really important for them.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be important for them in that NL West. Let's go ahead and move on to the San Francisco Giants. They signed their big time outfielder that everyone was saying they were going to sign this year. No, not that one, but they do sign Mitch Haniger to a 3-year, $43.5 million deal.
Yeah, Mitch Haniger's a guy who has been really good throughout his career in Seattle. He actually, I didn't even realize he came up with Arizona in 2016 and he got traded to Seattle. He's been really solid there. Really been a mainstay in their lineup throughout their rebuild. Was a really good player in 2018. Put up almost 5 WAR that year and a 137 WRC plus. He's had a lot of issues staying healthy, but when he's been healthy, he's been an above average hitter. Not a great defensive player. He's going to play in the corner, probably left field. The Giants have had some luck with guys like that. They did really well with Darren Ruff. They've had good luck with J.D. Davis so far after that trade, and then of course lefties that have done the same thing like Jock Peterson, Lamont Wade, some guys who, are kind of that poor defensive corner outfield platoonish type. I don't think he's really Haniger's really a platoon bat, but he's a guy who they'll be able to plug in there and mix and match a little bit, and he'll do a good job there as long as he stays healthy. But that's going to be the key for him is staying healthy, and I think he'll be a productive player for the Giants, and it's a pretty good signing, not too expensive for him. So.
Yeah, it's a really interesting deal for the Giants. Obviously they were hoping to sign another big time outfielder, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But the key is going to be that they need him to stay healthy, just like Matt mentioned there. They need a couple more pieces, but Haniger's really good. Let's go ahead and jump over to the National League East now, where we had the Phillies made a couple more moves on top of their Trey Turner addition. They've signed starting pitcher Taijuan Walker to a 4-year, $72 million deal. And then they also signed left-handed relief pitcher Matt Strahm to a 2-year, $15 million deal.
Obviously, the big move here for the Phillies and coming off of that Trey Turner deal that we talked about last week is this Taijuan Walker follow-up where Taijuan can kind of be that third pitcher in behind Nola and Wheeler. And a reminder that Nola will be a free agent next year. So locking down Taijuan Walker is a good move for the Phillies. He's one of prospect pedigree. He's always had a little bit he's been expected to be a little bit more than he has been. But he has a very nasty splitter, throws in the mid-90s. This is a guy that can give that rotation a good bit of balance because, you've got the filthy curveballs and sliders from Nola and Wheeler, but Taijuan Walker's going to pitch deep into games. He's going to give you 150 innings. He's going to be pretty reliable 3-4 starter. And what we saw was that this pitching market has had several signings that are really similar in price. This is the middle of those 3 signings, and you could probably argue that he's probably the second best signing anyway. So, he's had the lower ERA over the past few years, but maybe his spin rates and stuff haven't been quite as good. but the upside for him has always been there. He's just 30 years old. I really think that the Phillies have done a smart thing here and to lock him down for 4 years. And, we'll talk about another signing coming up that's almost exactly the same. And, I think both of them fit these teams really, really well, respectively. And so Walker going to the Phillies in the division rival, going away from the Mets, I think is a big plus for the Phillies. I don't know if you want to talk about Matt Strahm, Matt, but it's just a brief note.
Yeah, Matt Strahm's a lefty reliever who, he's going to be like that Andrew Chafin, Justin Wilson type of guy who every couple of years is going to put up a really good season, but he's not consistently good. So he's going to help the Phillies potentially this year. I think that's a little bit high on value, 2 for 15, but at the same time, we've been seeing that for relievers all offseason so far. And I want to add one thing on Walker. I didn't really like this signing very much. I thought that 4 for 72 compared to the other guys who were kind of in that same middle tier starting pitching market. I thought like that was a major overpay compared to Jameson Taillon, compared to Chris Bassett especially, and compared to like Kodai Senga. I thought that 4 for 72 was a little bit too much for Taijuan Walker, but that's just me. I think y'all are both a little bit higher on him than I am, but I don't see him as being better than those guys. So he's getting paid more. So
it depends to me on if you believe in that splitter.
Yeah.
It's like a plus 10 run value on Baseball Reference.
Yeah.
And so when considering these pitchers, I was always like, man, if you're interested in Kodai Senga, I don't see why you wouldn't be interested in Taijuan Walker.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move over to your Cubs, David. They made a one singular move that we're going to talk about on this episode, and that's they signed Jameson Taillon to a 4-year, $68 million deal.
Yeah, they made 2 moves, actually. They also signed Cody Bellinger to a 1-year deal worth $17 million. But listen, so I'll give my spiel on this because the Cubs, you'll note, we haven't said they signed anybody else. That's where everyone, I think, is a bit irate right now, is that the Cubs have kind of made 2 moves. They indicated they were moving forward with spending, and they haven't done anything else. So I think that's where the ire is, but I want to praise these moves because I think they're both really good. But they also happened on the same night. So it was like, I wish they would have spread them out a little bit and appeased all of Cubs Twitter and everyone. But Jameson Taillon, the Cubs think they can get a little more out of him. He's been pitching in Yankee Stadium, and before that he pitched for the Pirates. So both of those things are not going to help you as a pitcher. And the Cubs love a big curveball, and that's what Jameson Taillon has. He's making less money than Taijuan Walker, and you just heard Matt praise him for probably being a better value than Taijuan Walker anyway. He's expected to be a reliable starter, and that's exactly what the Cubs need in this rotation. They've got a lot of upside and a lot of really young guys. Getting a guy like Jameson Taillon to come in and kind of take the mantle every 5th day, lead these guys, show Hayden Wesneski and Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson how to pitch, and he can go in there and get a little more strikeouts, I think, than Taijuan Walker has in his career, and a little more than Chris Bassett probably. So, this is a good move that I really like. As for Cody Bellinger, we talked all about how much upside it is that Cody Bellinger hit the market. A left-handed hitting, power hitting center fielder with that much athleticism and that much quality defense for just $12 million is a steal. And that's if he just repeats what he did last year. If Cody Bellinger comes back to form at all, which he needs to do, it's a contract year for Cody Bellinger, right? He has to come in and show he's healthy and play really well. And that's what everybody in Chicago is hoping for. That's what I'm hoping for. And, he can go into next offseason earning a huge contract if he comes in and plays well this year. That's certainly what the Cubs are hoping for. It solves their center field question. The outfield is now set. The infield is now where all the question marks lie with the Cubs. So I love these 2 moves, but the lack of movement elsewhere is what's very concerning for the Cubs and for all Cubs fans right now. And obviously with a couple of shortstops still out there, maybe they can do something. But for now, good moves, good contracts, very excited for next year. But we'll see if they can actually back it up on the rest of it.
Yeah, it was a really good move for the Cubs to get Taillon. The other move that the Cubs didn't make another move. I don't know what you're talking about there. There's that one. Let's go ahead and then we'll jump over and we'll hit on the Yankees, they signed a couple people. We'll start with the lower one to begin with, which is them re-signing Tommy Kahnle to a 2-year, $11.5 million deal. I could probably talk about it a little bit more since he was with the Dodgers this last year, but he's a guy who had Tommy John surgery. He's missed most of the past couple seasons. I think he came back this year and had, I think, 12 innings. Looked pretty decent in most of them once he got the rust off of it. His strikeout numbers weren't as high as they've been in his career. He was walking people like normal. But overall, ground ball pitcher, was getting 68% ground balls in LA. Did some high leverage situations there for him. He'll slot right into that back end of that bullpen somewhere. They have a lot of question marks with injuries in that back end. So he's a guy who could potentially come in and get some saves for him, but probably a high leverage reliever, late in games for them. But the big one that everyone wants to hear is that the Yankees made the move. They re-signed Aaron Judge on a 9-year, $360 million deal.
Yeah, I guess I can start with this. The Giants wanted him. The Padres came in there and wanted him. And Judge, at the end of the day, did decide he wanted to go back to New York, which I'm not surprised at all. I kind of expected it. But 9 years, $360 million, that's a huge contract. I think we were mostly in like the 8 for 320 range-ish on our predictions. So he got one more year than we were kind of expecting, which isn't a big surprise. The AAV is kind of what we were kind of thinking. Judge had one of the best seasons ever. This year, 11 wins above replacement, the 62 home runs, breaking the American League record. Just fantastic. I don't think he'll do that again because, nobody's going to do that again for a while. But he's going to be really good for them, at least for the next few years. He's a guy who it'll be interesting to see how he ages with his, with his size. And he's a very unorthodox player. So is he going to age very well or not? It's possible by age 34, especially with his injury history. I know he's been healthy the last 2 years, but he's had an injury history. Kind of think where you end up looking at this this signing and whether it's good or not is, if he in 2 or 3 years, if he has to go to a DH role or something in 2 years or 3 years, or if it's more like 6 or 7 years, because the last couple of years of this deal aren't going to be very valuable. You're kind of buying that with having a premier player for the next 3 or 4 years. So, but good for the Yankees on keeping him. I know that it sounded like Steinbrenner stepped in at the last minute and said, we're not losing him because Cashman was probably going to let him walk because that's what Cashman does. So, but hey, good for the Yankees on bringing their key player back. And, it'll be interesting to see. He's basically their whole team in 2022. And I kind of expect that to happen again in 2023.
Yes. Judge is absolutely deserving of that contract to start. That is one of the best seasons we've seen in recent memory since the Barry Bonds days. 200 WRC plus, 11 WAR, like you said. The interesting thing to note that came out during the Judge negotiations was a report last week regarding the usage of types of baseballs. And the interesting thing to note was that down the stretch, the Yankees were getting a different type of ball than every other team. And whether or not that had anything to do with Judge hitting more home runs, we can't really say. But what we do know is that MLB is changing the balls out for which games they feel are more important, which down the stretch they want to Judge to hit 62. So in theory, they're giving, the Judge games the more juiced balls. That's pretty disappointing to come out right as Aaron Judge is trying to sign a $360 million contract. And, obviously it doesn't take anything away from his ability. We watch Aaron Judge play and he's the kind of guy who he doesn't even really need a juiced ball to hit the ball 450 feet. But it's like the premise of MLB doing stuff like this to try to drive their narratives. And it really feels a little bit fishy, and I just don't like how that feels. And that's just something important that did happen during these Aaron Judge negotiations. The other interesting thing that happened, well, 2 more did, but one of those is a little less important. The other interesting thing that happened was that the Padres deal was going to be for 14 years. And MLB was not going to allow the deal to go through. They were going to strike it back because it was going to be circumventing the CBT negotiation threshold because the Padres weren't expecting to pay Judge, but they wanted to lower the annual average value against the luxury tax. So, a couple of odd things happening around this Aaron Judge deal, but overall, great deal. Aaron Judge is a superstar. And the other interesting thing is that Damian perfectly predicted this contract.
That I did.
Good job.
Yep, there it is. That's my one little bit of excitement about this whole episode. I forgot. I guess we didn't even put it on here. The biggest free agent signing of Jason Hayward.
Oh, yep.
We didn't. How did I forget to put that one on here?
It's the biggest one the Dodgers have made.
You know what?
No, it's not Clayton Kershaw, but
well,
almost.
It's the biggest new acquisition.
Hayward's going to turn it around and play great for the Dodgers. He is.
Oh, I know. This 2015 free agency for the Dodgers of Shelby Miller, Jason Hayward, and Clayton Kershaw is electric. Let me tell you.
Hey, you could get Dansby Swanson and Shelby Miller. Dansby Swanson will end up on the same team finally.
Oh my God, so they could. And wow.
Well, that's just to pair with Dansby, right. But all right, we'll move on from my suffering. Actually, not really, because the next one's with the Red Sox signing Kenley Jansen to a $32 million deal. But
Kenley's been gone for a year for you, though. It's surely he's parted, or does it still hurt?
I predicted him back to the Dodgers in the free agency.
Oh,
yeah, but I can go ahead and start with Kenley Jansen because he was most recently on my team. But yeah, Kenley Jansen in 2022 was had a pretty interesting season. He was pretty good, but he had a stretch, and I think it's kind of been the way it's been. I mean, you can probably elaborate on it too, Damian, but it's kind of been the way it's been the last 3 or 4 years. He goes through a stretch where he loses his mechanics a little bit and just looks awful for a 2-week stretch, and then he finds it again. And that kind of happened this year. He had some bad luck on balls in play too this year at times, but he was a pretty solid. He had a pretty solid season, a 3.38 ERA. Thing about Kenley Jansen is he's going to be 35. He's had that heart issue. He hasn't stayed with the most health, and the stuff isn't quite what it was. He's relying a little bit more on some of the, maybe his sinker and slider a little bit more than he used to, where he could just blow everybody away with his elite cutter. I wasn't too sad to see him leave Atlanta. I mean, it would have been fine if he had been brought back. He was good for the Braves in 2022, but it's hard with the reliever market because if this was any other year before 2022 offseason, I would say that this is a terrible contract. But the way the reliever market's been this year, I mean, it's hard to say. But I think 2 for 32 is pretty risky for the Red Sox, who apparently aren't willing to pay right now anybody to pay a reliever $16 million a year when, I mean, you're letting your star player walk because you can't pay him. I mean, especially a guy like Kenley Jansen, who seems to be on the decline a little bit at least. I know the Red Sox need bullpen help bad, but man, that's a tough. I don't know if I love this signing at all.
I love Kenley Jansen, but
yeah, I do too.
I don't love this. I don't love the idea of the Red Sox because that $32 million you could have committed to Xander Bogearts, and by all reports, Xander was waiting for the Red Sox to come over the couple of $200 million deals he had offered until the Padres missed out on Judge. Then Xander gets the $280 million deal, and he, of course, jumps on that. I completely understand Xander's point of view here. Completely understand Kenley, take the deal, right? That's a pretty big bag for a 35-year-old, but, you bring up a good point there. Red Sox also signed Masataka Yoshida for a 5-year, $90 million deal, and I believe he's 30 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And I was... The biggest comparison I can make to this 29. Is that the Cubs. Okay, yeah. The Cubs signed Seiya Suzuki at 27 for a 5-year, $75 million deal last offseason. So the Red Sox are throwing money around, but they didn't throw it at Xander.
Yeah, and you say that signing of Seiya Suzuki, I mean, I think Seiya Suzuki was considered the better prospect coming over. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of hype around him and Yoshida. I know there's people who like him, but I don't think there's all that much hype around Yoshida. So definitely interesting to see what happens here. I mean, I don't know if I don't know what to think about that one. So
No, neither did rival GMs, because a lot of them, there was a story where anonymous rival GMs were coming out and saying that they weren't even paying or bidding half of what he got from the Red Sox on him.
yeah,
Like they thought he'd be fine if he was for 30 or 40 million on a 5-year deal, not 90 million.
yeah. Can you
I
say
didn't.
Rosny Castillo?
Oh man,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be quite that bad, but I didn't want to speak totally to that. But that's what I saw. I don't believe in this deal at all. Right? I wasn't even that. I was a little bit skeptical of Seiya, who has come over and proven that I think he's got another gear in him after the numbers from this year, and I think that's one of those things the Cubs are really excited about. I don't know that how quickly is this guy going to be able to adjust when we saw Seiya, who was a better player at a younger age, struggle in his first year. He was good, but he wasn't great. The Red Sox need great now in order to be able to not lose the Xander production, and I don't know that this is going to do it.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and stay with this Cubs theme that we've kind of had, David, right here, and that's with the St. Louis Cardinals signing catcher Willson Contreras to a 5-year, $87.5 million deal.
Good for Willson Contreras, man. He got shafted at the deadline, I think, because he got attached to that qualifying offer because the Cubs didn't trade him. What came out later was that the Cubs had a deal in place with the Astros, and Willson would have been a World Series champ had he been on the Astros. So kind of tough for him there, but $87 million will help that out. Division rival. He's already playing up the crowd for the Cardinals, but I worry about I've always worried about his ability to catch. He's not a good blocker. By all accounts, he's not a great game caller. He's very aggressive with the throws, which he gets from having watched Yadier Molina and some of those other guys with really big arms. He tries to emulate that, and oftentimes it works, but it does get him in trouble. He's also very, very bad on the base paths, over aggressive, gets a lot of thrown out on base paths. And I've watched him for ever since he came up. He came up in 2016. He's a World Series champion. I love the guy, but I don't lament this loss as much as a lot of Cubs fans, just because he does a lot. He's very, very passionate in the way he plays the game, but that often leads him into getting into mistakes. And that may come from having played his whole career with Javi Baez until last year, but he's the kind of guy who's going to supplement that Cardinals lineup. It makes them very difficult to catch in the Central. He can play DH, so they don't always need to play him at catcher. He's going to age probably out of catcher after a few years. This is a Willson Contreras friendly deal, I think, and hopefully he doesn't wear out his welcome in St. Louis, because they do not like flashy, loud players there very much.
Yeah, I can. On Contreras, it's interesting. He's been kind of talked about like a star player for his entire career, and honestly, like his best season, this was his career year in wins above replacement at 3.3. He's been a really good hitter, but like David mentioned, the catching and the base running is so bad. I mean, it would be one thing if he was just not he didn't have speed as a catcher, but I mean, the base running is absolutely atrociously bad. Like it drops his value more. He's a good player. 2 to 3 WAR per year, I think, is an expectation for him, and a solid one. If he has to DH, I don't know if the bat is quite good enough to be worth his contract. If he's going to DH, he's going to put up a 110 to 120 WRC plus most years. Probably you might get a 130 year out of him like you did in 2022, which would be really, really good. But I think with the Cardinals, maybe they feel like they can work on him on some of the framing and game calling stuff, maybe improve him a little bit. They've had a history of having veteran catchers there, obviously with Yadier Molina all these years. Maybe they feel like they can use some of the knowledge they've gotten through that experience and apply it to Contreras a little bit. He's a good, like I say, he's a good player, but and I think this is probably the market value for him. I think it's a fine contract. I think part of it, the value on it just depends on, is he going to stay at catcher? How long is he going to stay at catcher? And can he work on that defense a little bit? Because like you mentioned, I mean, he's got the arm, and I think he's got the athletic tools to be really good behind the plate. He just doesn't have the details. He doesn't do the details well. And if he can kind of get in his veteran time, get to where he does the details a little bit better, he could be a pretty good value on that contract. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, this just screams Cardinals magic. Like Cardinals devil magic all over it.
For what it's worth, Matt, Wilson's more of a star at catcher as opposed to just in the league in general.
Yeah.
He's well
Right.
above catcher average, so
Yeah, it's
that
at
makes
the
him
plate.
a solid catcher. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and transition over to the Matt's portion of the episode with the Braves making a couple moves. But we had their first trade being that they acquired Joe Jimenez and cash from the Detroit Tigers for outfielder Justin Henry Malloy and left-handed pitcher Jake Higginbotham.
Yeah, I'll be very brief on this first trade. But Joe Jimenez is a guy who has some really good metrics. Got a high spin rate fastball, a really good breaking ball, and he put up a really good season in 2022. Had a 270 xFIP in 56 innings. The ERA was a 3.49. Part of that might be playing in front of the Tigers defense, which is really bad. But a 2.90 expected ERA is solid. So I think he's a pretty good reliever. He'll slot into a setup role type thing, maybe like a seventh inning guy probably, as Raisel Iglesias takes over as a closer this year. I thought this was a really weird trade because I know there's some mixed opinions on Justin Henry Malloy, who is the main return, and the Braves farm system's really bad, but Justin Henry Malloy was actually the best, by most publications, the highest rated prospect as a position player in the Brave system. There's some really young guys that are coming up that have been international signings that are rated higher by some, like Fangraphs, but Justin Henry Malloy had a really good year in 2022, and he's close to the big leagues. He's a good on base guy, so he is just a corner outfield type, but it is a real prospect to give up for a guy who, before this year, I mean, Joe Jimenez has never been a good reliever until this year. So it'll be interesting to see if the Braves maybe saw something in him and are able to figure something out with him. But I thought this was a kind of bizarre trade from the Braves. I didn't really understand it too well.
It just seems like a depth piece.
Yeah.
Jimenez is the kind of guy who explodes in the right system, and the Braves are very good about getting the best out of their relievers. So I think Jimenez is a lock to be one of those guys that really goes nuts next year.
It's very possible.
Absolutely.
And given the price of relief pitching, I mean, giving up a medium prospect isn't really that big of a deal when Jimenez probably costs, $50 million on the market if he was to sign this year,
I don't think he'd cost that much. He's a career 5.24 ERA.
He's the kind of guy you're going for upsides. It's like 3 years, $15 million a year. You know what I mean? Like, it could be something like that.
I thought you said no, 50. I was like,
3 years, God. 3 years, $45 million total, something like that.
45 to 50 overall.
Yeah, like a total deal, not like 1 year. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yep, give Joe Jimenez more than Aaron Judge.
No, still, I mean, $50 million. If he signed a 3-year, $50 million deal with his track record, that would be an absolutely ridiculous contract, and whoever signed it should be fired.
Well,
can
I give you
Robert Suarez?
Robert Suarez did not sign a 3-year, $50 million deal.
30 something. I don't remember.
All
right, move on.
I think it was 4 years too.
Listen, if there's a team that I can give you who is making notorious not smart moves here.
Well, we're about to talk about it, aren't we?
That's what I'm talking about. It's time. We'll transition to the next trade, which also involves the Braves, the Brewers, and the A's. So right before the winter meetings, we mentioned it on last week's episode that Sean Murphy's market was heating up and he was close to getting traded. We didn't know where. And then it said the Braves were going to be a spot. And then 20 minutes later came out, nope, the Braves are not going to be the spot. Well, the trade happened today and the Braves were the spot. So the Braves actually acquired Sean Murphy, while the Milwaukee Brewers acquired Willson Contreras, Justin Yeager, and Joel Payamps. Sorry if I butcher these names. Some of these are really weird. And then the A's, Payamps. There you go. The A's acquire Kyle Muller, Yestri Ruiz, Freddie Tarnok, Roybers Salinas, and Manny Pena.
I hate the A's. Dude, this trade is bonkers, man.
Yeah, it is.
Here's the thing, right? Is we saw that Sean Murphy was getting an ask of Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and a good pitching prospect from the Cardinals, right? Two solid major leaguers that were up there in Rookie of the Year voting. And that was going to be an impactful trade for the Cardinals, but they went the route of just signing Willson Contreras. This trade is like a quarter of that value to the A's, if that. It is horrible for the A's. They do not get a single top 100 prospect. They give up the lone all-star that they got in the trade to the Brewers for Yesteri Ruiz, who is a speed-first utility player. I'd like Yesteri Ruiz. I might even be the high guy on Yesteri Ruiz. But come on. William Contreras just made the all-star team this year as a catcher. You just gave him to the Brewers. And they gave away another all-star catcher to the freaking Braves.
Let's just put it this trade, the A's traded the best player, and I don't think they got the top 3 best players back, maybe. Like,
they got the third best player. I think it's Mueller, but like player. Yeah. Oh my God.
But
yeah. So
give us Kyle Mueller.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I can elaborate on all the pieces of this trade from the Braves. So in my opinion, in this trade, the Braves, if the Braves and the A's made this trade straight up without the Brewers being involved, then obviously there's no Yesteri Ruiz, and William Contreras would be an A. That would make a lot of sense. This trade was actually pretty even for the Braves. You got all-star catcher Sean Murphy. You gave up a lot of quantity. Kyle Mueller is actually pretty good. I think that he's gotten a bad he's kind of forgotten about a little bit because of the fact that he's been in that upper minors and kind of bottom, he's kind of been in the MLB mix for a couple years now, but last year he started making some strides at AAA. He was extremely good until like 3/4 of the way through the season when he broke his hand, and he tried to pitch through it and it was bothering him, and he wasn't quite as good at the very end of the season, but he put up fantastic numbers in AAA. And in the big leagues he looked pretty good. He only pitched 12 innings, but he had one really bad outing in the big leagues. But other than that one outing, his other 2 outings were pretty good. So this is a guy he's a real prospect. I mean, he's really I think that honestly, I think he probably should be a top 100, back into the top 100. There's some people with mixed opinions on his fastball and whether it's got the shape for it or not, which that's a good question. But so Kyle Muller's a legitimate, I think he'll probably be a 3 or 4 starter in the big leagues for a long time. So you got him. You've got Freddie Tarnok, who's kind of a high upside upper minors guy who is maybe one of those could end up being like a late bloomer type. And then of course the big pieces though are going to be, or Roy Bertolinas also is a guy who he had a lot of strikeouts in the low minors, but I think he's more of like a potential reliever one day. He's not much. Manny Pena is a good backup catcher. But the big pieces in this were Sean Murphy and William Contreras. Other than Kyle Mueller, Sean Murphy, all-star catcher, or should be he wasn't an all-star, I don't think, but he should have been. He put up 5 WAR this year. Gold Glove defender, 122 WRC plus. He's 3 of his 4 big league seasons. He's been over 120 WRC plus as an elite defensive catcher. If he can continue doing what he's done so far, he is a top 5 catcher in baseball easily. He's very, very, very good. He's also pretty athletic. His base running metrics are not that bad either for a catcher, which is solid. So he's really good. It's kind of weird with the Braves because they have Travis d'Arnaud. I think they'll probably split time a lot to keep them both fresh. And Travis d'Arnaud will probably be moving on after this year, so it makes sense. Sean Murphy's under control for 3 seasons. William Contreras is a guy who, he's a good hitter. He obviously made the All-Star team this year, although he's a replacement for Bryce Harper in the All-Star game. Put up a 138 WRC plus. He's a good hitter. I don't know if he's as good as he put up. I think this might be his career year, honestly, as a hitter. The approach is kind of weird. He seems really predetermined with his swings. Sometimes he'll go up there just hacking away just at nothing, and he'll look like Javi Baez. And then half the time he'll look like the most patient hitter in the history of baseball at the plate, and so it's kind of weird. But the big thing with him is defensively. The Braves have been really worried about him being a good defender and developing that part of his game. He was really poor behind the plate this year, and he has been in his young major league career so far. And I think that's probably what you're seeing this move being, is the Braves believe he's a DH. And if he's a DH, he's probably going to put up a 120-ish WRC plus on a consistent basis. He's probably more of like a decent piece. but he's very young and he's got a great arm. He could develop into a good catcher. Honestly, in a lot of ways, he's a little bit like his brother.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. He's very, very
Yep.
similar to his brother. I don't think he's got quite the same kind of upside as his brother at the plate. I think he's more of like a 110 WRC plus guy most of the time. But he's a very good. I think he's a very solid piece. He's nothing like what Sean Murphy is. So the weirdest part about this trade, and the other pieces in the trade weren't much in the Braves A's part. So that part was pretty even. Why in the world the A's flipped William Contreras to the Brewers for Esteury Ruiz? I'll never understand that. I really don't understand that one. Maybe y'all can explain it. That made absolutely zero sense to me.
I have a theory on it. I don't know if you have anything else, Damon, but the theory I saw was that Esteury Ruiz may have a exceeded value due to the new rules.
Ooh.
My counter to that would be that he's been playing under the new rules in the minors and stole 50 bases a year, and he was
Still
a good hitter in the minors, and when he came up to the majors, he was a terrible hitter this last year. So I don't see it. I don't see the vision. I think he's a perfectly fine utility guy. He might be a 100 WRC plus guy with some good stolen bases. Like, this is, even if William Contreras is a DH only, right? You're trading a DH who just had a 130 WRC plus with the ability to go play catcher every now and again for a utility guy. And William Contreras' upside is so much higher than that, right? Like, this just it's a disaster of a trade, and it's a disaster of a trade for any of those teams with bigger prospects or bigger major league pieces or guys that are maybe a little more reliable than Kyle Muller at the starting pitching slot. Like, and I do want to bring it to the Cubs, but like, there's other teams involved as well that could have made a trade that beat this. The fact that this is the trade blows my mind, and it should blow every baseball fan's mind. Like, how was this the trade for Sean Murphy? Because the talent here is not high upside. It's not top 100. It's not superstars. It's maybes and possiblies. And what if the rules are different and stuff like that?
I will say that the trade between the Braves and the A's was pretty. I think it was pretty, because I mean, at the end of the day, the Braves traded a guy who, I mean, Kyle Muller is a fringe top 100 guy. He's not a he's a fringe top 100. He is. There's a few. He's been a top 100 before. He's a fringe top 100, and then A's. I don't think he is a top 100, but he's like a top 120. And then you've got a catcher who made the All-Star game this year. I mean, so like that, and then a couple other pieces. I mean, Freddie Tarnock's he's got some upside to him too. I mean, these other pieces involved too. That trade, I mean, all-star catcher William Contreras and who's very young and controllable, and a couple of good prospects, not good but not great prospects for Sean Murphy is pretty fair. I think it's the flipping William Contreras for Esteury Ruiz, and honestly, to be honest, I think this trade is such an outlier on the value the A's got that I don't think it's going to set anything in the market. I think it's just an outlier. Teams are going to look at it and be like, what in the world is going on? Like, they're not even going to look at it as a potential like precedent for something else. So
I hope they don't.
Yeah, I really don't think they will.
I hope they don't, because this is an awful trade for the A's. I don't care how you're trying to.
I'm not saying it's a good trade for the A's. I'm saying it's a horrible trade for the A's. I'm saying that the way the Braves and A's lined up was fine. The fact that the A's got rid of the top piece in the trade that they got back for nothing is not good.
Yeah,
and that's horrible for them.
It's not good value. I don't care even how you try to spend it. Esteury Ruiz must be the most valuable player of all time, because he was a key part in getting the Josh Hader deal done from San Diego to Milwaukee, and now all of a sudden he's been flipped for William Contreras to that point. But
there's got to be something with him that teams are seeing that nobody else is seeing, because like you say, I mean, there's something with him that teams that we're not seeing. And I don't know what it is.
His Fangraphs page in the minors, his stats in the minors are incredible. They're absolutely incredible. He has not translated that to the majors whatsoever, and we have no idea if he will. It's a massive lottery ticket. That's not a lottery ticket you trade an all-star catcher for. Even if you were going to split time with Langoliers and William Contreras, like, it's not. Even if Manny Pena and the prospects for Esteury Ruiz, that made some sense. That would have made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll keep it brief because I know we've went really long on here. But I'm probably the guy who's the highest on Sean Murphy here. Like, I love Sean Murphy, and what he's going to do in Atlanta is just rake. Like, he's a Gold
He's gonna
Glove
be
defender
really
as well. But just looking at his 2022 stats, home and away. Oh, at home he's a 227 hitter, and away he was a 271 hitter.
Yeah.
Like, and
Murphy's about to go nuts.
if you go to his career numbers, he's 213 away or at home and 256 on the road. He has at away games, he has 12 more homers in his career.
He's going to be very similar in value to JT Realmuto, in my opinion.
He's going to be. You're going to see him jump into that upper echelon with JT Realmuto, with Will Smith.
He's already
with
there.
That.
He's already, yeah.
Well,
I'm
talking about offensively. Like, you're going to see him offense. He's there because mostly his defense, right? Those other two are more offensive.
And he put up a 122 WRC plus this year. So
in Oakland. And you know
yeah,
the Braves. The Braves are about to extend him too.
Yeah.
Well, they're 3 years. Who knows?
10 years. 10 years. $20 million.
Yeah, right. The Braves are about to extend him too. It's going to happen.
The press release is coming.
Mm-hmm. No, I saw something that said that the Braves extended Sean Murphy for 6 years and that he's going to pay them. How much of a team-friendly deal it's going to be?
Gosh.
While we're on the crapping on the Oakland A's portion, they did sign a couple free agents that we do need to mention. That they signed Aledmus Diaz for a 2-year, $14.5 million deal, and then they also signed Jace Peterson to a 2-year, $9.5 million deal.
Yeah, I can mention Jace Peterson real quick. He's a good utility guy, former Brave. Always had some pretty good on base skills. They used to call him Jace on base, and I like him. So I guess that one's a fine signing, even though it doesn't make sense for the A's to dump their entire payroll on him, even though it's just $4 million a year, $4.5 million a year.
Yeah, doesn't make sense at all. But let's go ahead and transition. David kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier when we were talking about the Red Sox, but the second biggest move of the winter meetings probably is that the San Diego Padres signed Xander Bogearts to an 11-year, $280 million deal.
So this deal is wild because the twists and turns there were crazy, and I think we lost Matt, so we'll get him back hopefully. But the twists and turns on the Xander Bogearts deal were absolutely insane. Originally, he was expected to go to the Red Sox. All the momentum was to the Red Sox. This was after we had heard a number of other teams getting involved. Cubs were involved. A couple Giants were involved. We heard the Padres were involved. He wanted to go to the Red Sox. It was pretty clear from the way the reports were circulating that the momentum was with the Red Sox. And then the bomb drops from Passan that he gets 11 years, $275 million. He was projected at or just under $200 million. I think everyone was kind of thinking 6 for $180. I think that's what I projected. 7 for $210 maybe was going to be his ceiling, right? That would be the kind of coming over the top to get him. Red Sox were at 6 for $160. So whatever the Red Sox were seeing, the Padres overbid them by $120 million to go get Xander Bogearts. And I love Xander Bogearts. He was maybe my top choice for the Cubs, but this is mind-blowing in terms of the amount of spending here. Bogearts getting $11 million at age 31 or 11 years at age 31 is also rather astounding because, he's obviously not going to play the last 2 or 3 years of that deal. That's going to be dead money on the Padres books. So, this is just them trying to shore up that infield. They'll probably move Fernando Tatis Jr. to the outfield. This team's going to be an absolute juggernaut for at least the next 2 years while Juan Soto's there.
Yeah, this deal it's something for sure. It's head scratching, and then it makes all the sense in the world at the same time.
Yeah, I'll add in there. This deal. I 100% with what you just said, Damien. It's head scratching, but it makes so much sense. But you know what? Xander Bogearts is a very similar player. Most people won't hate on. He's very similar to Derek Jeter. He's not a great defensive player.
Only the Red Sox fans.
Offensively, Derek Jeter career WRC plus 119. Xander Bogearts career WRC plus 118. They're both very meh defenders at shortstop. Xander Bogearts is an extremely good player, and people don't give him the kind of credit just because he hasn't put up 1 year where he's a crazy MVP candidate. but he's consistent year after year, like a very, very, very good player. Outside of 2020, which was the shortened year, his worst WAR in his career is 3.1 in 2017. Other than that, he's put up 4 WAR every season, or 4 WAR or more every season, except for since his first 2 years. So like he is an extremely good player. But the thing is, I mean, you're going to be paying him until he's 40, and he's probably not going to stick on shortstop, even though this was his best year at shortstop in his career defensively. I don't think he'll stick there the rest of his career. I think he'll be 2 or 3 more years, and then he'll move to. I'm not sure if he'll move to second or third. Probably third, if I had to guess. But
Manny should be opting out next year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense then, because if Manny opts out next year, he might move sooner rather than later. But it sounds like they're worried about Tatis playing the infield, and they don't even know what Tatis is going to end up like. I mean,
yeah,
nobody. That's just a question mark at this point. So the one worry with Bogearts is his power numbers were down a little bit this year. That's a little bit worrisome, but not extremely worrisome, because I mean everyone's power numbers were down just a little bit. But we'll see what happens with him. I think that he, for the next 2 or 3 years, is a fantastic signing. I don't know long term how it's going to work out, but this guy is really good, and I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves around baseball for being an elite shortstop.
Yeah, he's really good. Did you guys hear the story about him at the basketball game the night that he signed?
No.
So he was at I think it was the Boston Celtics versus the Suns. And he, like, at halftime, he got up and he went and called, I think it's Boris was his agent, and said, like, what's the Red Sox doing? Like, what are they looking at? And Boris told him, like, this is what they're at, and this, like, their final point. And he's like, really, that's it? Like, that's all they're going to give me? And he's like, yeah, that's where they're at. So these are other offers. And he said, okay. And then he went back to the game, and in the fourth quarter, he was walking out, and he took a picture with some young fan. And the young fan was like a Boston fan. He's like, oh, can I take a picture? Can I take a picture? He's like, yeah, sure. He's like, so are you re-signing with Boston? Are you coming back? And Xander said, no, and turned around and walked out. And then like 30 minutes later, it broke that he signed with the Padres.
Jeez.
That was hilarious. I heard that story. So funny. But, as a fan of a team in the same division as the Padres, I hate this move. Like, it makes them so good. Like, getting Xander, you're going to get Tatis back. I mean, and they basically just replaced, Eric Hosmer / Josh Bell with Xander Bogearts, and then Will Myers with Fernando Tatis Jr. I mean, when he comes back, that's pretty much what they did from last season. And they were the team that bounced the Dodgers out of the playoffs. And LA has done nothing this offseason to improve, while San Diego has been in on Trey Turner. They made a run at Aaron Judge, and now they just signed Xander Bogearts, who is also a target of the Dodgers, supposedly.
It's wild.
It is wild.
But act like a big market team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that are big market teams, let's go ahead and move on to the Steve Cohen just doesn't give a crap about the luxury tax portion of the episode. And that's with the New York Mets. We'll just list out all the moves, and we can just kind of talk about them together. The Mets signed Jose Quintana to a 2-year, $26 million deal. They re-signed Brandon Nimmo on an 8-year, $162 million deal. They signed David Robertson to a 1-year, $10 million deal. And then they also signed the Star International starting pitcher free agent Kodai Senga to a 5-year, $75 million deal.
You know what's interesting about the Mets this offseason? I think they made all these moves to get back to where they were last year, because they replaced DeGrom with Verlander. They replaced Taijuan Walker with Jose Quintana, which is similar value. They replaced Chris Bassett with Kodai Senga, probably about a similar value. They replaced Adam Ottavino with David Robertson, probably a similar player. And then they replaced Brandon Nimmo with Brandon Nimmo. So,
and Edwin Diaz with
Edwin Diaz. So it's really interesting to me that they've made all these moves, and they're kind of back to where they were last year. Maybe not. I mean, depending on what you think of Verlander going forward versus DeGrom, maybe not quite back to what they were last year. I mean, they're probably not done because they have Steve Cohen. But I thought it was interesting. But I absolutely love the Quintana signing. I thought they took a lot of discipline. I put him on a similar type of market as like a Jameson Taillon or Taijuan Walker. Maybe I
No.
probably wouldn't have given him quite as much because of the age, but I mean, he's also like he's coming off a really good season too. So 2 for 26, I think is a fantastic value. I would have given him 3 for 40 at least, probably 3 for 50. And then you look at Brandon Nimmo. I think that's probably a little bit of an overpay, but I mean he's a good player. I mean you're going to be paying a lot of money for good players, and Steve Cohen doesn't care. So, $20 million. I don't know if Brandon Nimmo is a $20 million player. His game is really tied up in his plate discipline, which is good, but he hits for like no power, and he's a good player though. And then, David Robertson. 1 for 10 is fine. He's a veteran reliever coming off a pretty good season. I doubt he does the same he did last year, but there's a chance he does, and that's not really a risky thing. And then Kodai Senga's interesting. That's a fairly risky signing, but honestly, $15 million a year for a guy with his profile coming out of Japan is not bad, even though he is a little bit older for one of those pitchers coming over.
Rumor has it that Kodai Senga signed with the Mets over better offers because he wanted to play for a team that was going to win. I do think that you're probably right in that the Mets kind of are doing all this to get back to where they were. But I also do not think Jose Quintana is remotely close to Talion Walker Senga. He overperformed as a soft contact guy last year and had been horrible the 2 or 3 years before that. He's been good before, but yeah, I've watched the guy pitch. He has spurts where he's good, and then he has spurts where he's terrible. And then he wound up pitching in front of the Cardinals defense last year, which was one of the best defenses in baseball. So, he'll be okay for the Mets, but he's not going to be anything close to what Taijuan Walker or Senga are. And that contract looks perfectly reasonable, but it is a replacement deal for, some of those guys who left their rotation. Brandon Nimmo's the big one, I think, in this in terms of contract. And I think this is a monster overpay for what Brandon Nimmo was bringing, because Brandon Nimmo's played more than 100 games. I want to say one time. I'm going to double check that very quickly. Yeah,
2018
I think it's 2 times. Yeah. So, and that, even then he only played 150 games once, which was last year. So this guy is very, very unreliable in terms of injuries. And you're also paying Starling Marte, who missed time last year, to be in the outfield. And, Steve Cohen just doesn't care about the luxury tax, man. He's gone up over $400 million for the luxury tax. This is how baseball owners should be operating, to be clear. But at some point, right, he's going to pay the price for having a bunch of overpriced old guys playing on his team. And that's the beauty of going nuts on the free agent market, is that it's going to come back and bite him at some point, but might not be next year. The Mets may be really good.
Yeah, it's one of those things like I was talking about earlier. I've said it just about every episode we've talked about the Mets. Steve Cohen runs the team like a fan runs the team. And Brandon Nimmo for 8 years, 162, just to keep him there. That's how a fan would run the team. Bringing back one of your own players, even if it doesn't make a ton of sense. So, I like Brandon Nimmo. I think he's a good player, but and you're going to pay a price for bringing a good player back, and he helps them. He's good, but that's kind of one of those things that I'm talking about, where it's just like he is running this like a fan rather than making smart decisions for next year and the future. We'll see what happens.
It's good for next year, I think.
Yeah,
the 2023
no
Mets are going to be a World Series favorite. They're going to be a popular pick. And I think they're going to have every opportunity to win it. They need to stop Metsing, obviously, but they've done a marvelous job of assembling a roster, man. It's a competitive roster. It's drawing in free agents for less money than other rosters that are giving them players more money. So, this year, yes, right. If they win the World Series, it's all worth it. Every year of financial misery or all those luxury taxes Steve Cohen's willing to pay, that's all that matters. What's important is that the Mets are trying to win, and they're showing other owners how it should be done. Same for the Padres, really.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and transition over to the Toronto Blue Jays, where they've made a couple free agent signings. They did sign Kevin Kiermaier, but I haven't been able to find anything on the terms of that deal. That happened on Saturday, and nothing has still been reported. But they also signed starting pitcher Chris Bassett for 3 years, $63 million.
Yeah, I guess I could start. I like Chris Bassett still. I thought that was pretty close to the market value on him. He's a good pitcher. I mean, I've definitely put him in the. I probably would have signed him for the definitely. I probably would have given him a fourth year, maybe, but he's. I thought he could, or I say that he probably could have gotten a fourth year. I think he probably should have gotten a little bit more than what Walker got, but he probably wanted the higher AAV with one fewer year for whatever reason. So he's a good, he's a good pitcher. I think he helps the Blue Jays a lot. They need some depth in their rotation. They had two really, really good ones at the top last year. Then the depth kind of fell off, especially as bad as Barrios was last year. If he can't come back to being good, then you need somebody to bring that production. And then, Kevin Kiermaier's just a good defensive center fielder. They need some defense in the outfield. They can probably throw George Springer to the corner where they sent off Teoscar Hernandez earlier in the offseason to Seattle. So putting Springer in the corner and then having a really good defensive center fielder, it's probably a good thing for the Blue Jays. So I like both of these signings just fine for them.
Chris Bassett's a good contact managing pitcher, but he's also, just a good arm in terms of reliability thus far. He came attached with that draft pick compensation, which made it a tougher signing for some of these lower teams that were looking to jump up rather than, the Blue Jays, who are a competitive team and they don't really care about that draft pick right now. They're looking to win. Bassett's going to be throwing in front of Matt Chapman. So, now you got Kevin Kiermaier in center field. I think the defense there is going to be solid. Santiago Espinal is a really good defender as well. And then you'll have Whit Merrifield sprinkling in at second base and in the corner outfield spots. Bo Bichette's at short. He's not a really good defender there. I mean, Vlad Jr. is going to be good. He's throwing to good catchers. I like this move for Bassett. I think I like this move better than I would have liked him, in some of these other situations that were rumored for Chris Bassett. Kiermaier is aging, and I was not confident at all. It's been a long time since he's played a full season. He's got to play part-time, I think, for them, but at least George Springer can be out of center field some. And I think that's what their goal was here.
Yeah, absolutely. And one little nugget that I found, and I sent it to David before the episodes, is that this is the fourth consecutive offseason that the Blue Jays have spent at least $20 million per year on a multi-year free agent.
That's how you do it.
Hyun-Jin Ryu, George Springer, Kevin Gausman, and Chris Bassett. They are acting like a large market team. Yep. I mean, in Toronto, obviously they should be.
Yep.
But I thought that was pretty interesting that a team, the Blue Jays, weren't notorious for spending a lot of money. Come in on the past four off seasons and have spent big.
I think it's interesting that they've spent in the way that they have, because they haven't really. I guess Springer might have been the large ticket free agent that year, but was that with the year with Garrett Cole? I don't know. But,
he wasn't the largest ticket available.
Yeah, but I was gonna say they seem to be.
He's the largest outfielder available.
Yes.
Right. So they seem to be spending on the upper middle tier free agent. They haven't gone out and got the superstar, like going out and signing one of the big shortstops or Judge this year, or last year one of the big shortstops, or when the Bryce Harper was a free agent or whatever, or Garrett Cole. Like they've gone out, they signed the bigger of the mid tier free agent, the biggest of the mid tier free agents. It's interesting because you see a lot of these teams that are spending big go out and sign the big free agent. And they've kind of spent a decent amount every year. And so it's kind of interesting to see how they've built their team. But they're doing a good job, obviously. They've got a really good roster. So
you'll know. Go ahead, Damien.
I was going to say one thing that I might find, or I think it's true, maybe you guys can fact check me here, is that each one of those free agents that I just mentioned were qualifying offer guys.
Yeah.
Yep. I think you're right.
So the four straight off seasons, they've surrendered a draft pick to sign somebody to a 20+
They don't care about their draft picks, apparently.
Yeah, win window is now. The other thing is that you'll note that they've been rather precise, I think, with their free agent offers. Reuse maybe the only miss right now, which tells me that spending adding a good player right in your area of need. Where for the Blue Jays it was the rotation, then it was center field. Rotation again. Now it's rotation again, right? Because they've consistently been let down by their rotation a little bit. So they're continuing to spend money on an area of need at the top end of the market. It seems like that is a good strategy to employ. And they're not getting too greedy. They're not metsing it where they're going over the top and hamstringing themselves down the road. Ryu's going to come off the books here pretty soon. it's not a deal that killed them, right? They competed through a bad signing of Hyunjin Ryu. The Blue Jays are kind of a mold of Jed Hoyer's spend intelligently, right? They're doing that, but they're spending intelligently at the top of the market, and that's an exemplary move, right? They're doing a good job, and they've developed good talent. I'd like to see him extend Bo Bichette or Vlad Jr. or one of those guys to kind of keep things rolling, but I mean, next year you could see him get like Rafi Devers or something. They could go out and get a bigger name or re-sign Matt Chapman even. He'll be a free agent next year.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting because Ryu comes off the books this next season. He's $20 million.
Yep.
So maybe they go and just sign Aaron Nola. I mean, who knows? Fits right in the pitching tier thing. But
yep.
Let's go ahead and we'll go to the San Francisco Giants again. Should have threw this one up with Haniger. I just completely forgot this was down here. But that's that they signed Sean Manaea to a 2-year, $25 million deal, which has an opt-out after this season.
Yeah, I got some other names for you. Alex Cobb, Alex Wood, Tony DeSclafani. I mean, Kevin Gossman when he was signed. I mean, the Giants have done this for the last 2 or 3 years, and ever since Zaidi's been there, they've gone out. They've signed a couple guys like Sean Manaea is this year that have shown some talent in their careers, but are coming off bad seasons. Maybe aren't quite what they were thought to be, or once were, but they feel like they can unlock something again, and they've been very successful with it. So I think that this could end up working out very well. The only thing about the Giants is that I don't know, unless they are able to get there have been rumors about them still going after, like Correa or one of the remaining big free agents. I don't know if Sean Manaea is going to be able to put them over the top this year, and he's got an opt-out. So if you figure him out and fix him, then he'll just opt out. So, and you're probably not going to get some kind of division out of him or anything, or playoff berth. So, maybe they are able to get Correa still, but this is a good signing for the Giants. They go out and get a guy who is a good reclamation project. So I think that it's what they've been doing, and I think it'll work out for them this time.
I like Manaea. I think he's a good reclamation. I think he's a better reclamation than Matt Boyd and Matt Clevenger, who went for right around the same money.
Yeah.
So, Manaea is definitely the kind of guy who can help that Giants rotation. But I didn't mention it when we talked about the Giants earlier. That team is not set up particularly well. They are lacking in a lot of areas.
They're not good.
Correa is not going to fix that. I think it's pretty clear why we haven't seen Correa already go to the Giants, and that's that maybe he's waiting for a team with a little bit better prospects to go ahead and step up for him because he doesn't want to go lose again. But that Giants team is not good. Manaea is not changing that. You're doing a lot of hoping with that rotation. You're just like, hope these guys don't all explode and be bad. So
Correa. I was going to say Correa is just waiting on that Braves press release to come out. 8 years, $110 million.
God. Yeah. I was going to say they for the Giants, they held on too long.
Yeah.
I mean, they should have sold off, what was it, 2018?
Yep.
I believe was the year they should have sold off. They didn't do it because they wanted to compete. And then in 2021, they had that like magical season where everything went the right way for them. And they factored in like, oh, hey, this is just going to happen again. Then they lost Buster Posey. And then, Crawford went back to Brandon Crawford. And Brandon Belt had a down year. And they just held on too long. This is a depth signing. And they do need to make big moves. That's why they were potentially in on Aaron Judge plus somebody else. I mean,
right.
There's a lot they have to do to be able to compete in that division. But let's move over to the last move that we have so we can wrap this episode up. And it happened just right before we were starting to record. And that's that the Minnesota Twins signed catcher Christian Vasquez to a 3-year, $30 million deal.
Yeah, this is a good move. The Twins had Gary Sanchez last year, who was famously not the best pitcher catcher. And so Christian Vasquez is kind of the quintessential pitcher catcher where he's going to always call a good game. He's going to be blocking the ball up. He was a very coveted name on the catcher market. And this payday, I think, is what Omar Narvaez's agents are going to take to the teams and get for him as well. So, this is a strong move. I think it's an extra year and maybe a few extra million than he was projected for. But in the way this market is going, I think the Twins have kind of stolen themselves a guy who can hit for league average and be a really good defensive catcher. So I'd look for maybe Tyler Mahle to take a step forward next year. Sonny Gray could take a step forward next year. Joe Ryan maybe, just all because Christian Vasquez is going to be catching him instead of Gary Sanchez. So,
yeah, I agree. He's a good catcher. Good to see the Twins still trying to compete. There were some rumors that they were still trying to bring back Correa. I'd be shocked if that happens, but there were rumors that they were like gonna shatter their all-time record for.
Well,
I mean,
listen,
I highly doubt it, but
well, hold on.
Know.
The Twins' all-time record for a given out contract is Joe Mauer at $184 million. So,
yeah,
you don't have to shatter much in order to get
right.
To
I'm just saying, numbers, like people were talking about like basically they're talking about like doubling their all-time highest contract, which would be Correa. I mean, so
what we're seeing right now for those remaining shortstops is Giants, Twins, Cubs for Correa and Swanson.
Yeah,
and maybe Dodgers, maybe Red Sox.
I guess maybe Braves still with Swanson involved, but probably.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so hard to say. I don't think it's going to happen, but
the Twins certainly could. But you think they were talking about the Twins breaking their franchise record for an offer? Yeah. The Cubs franchise record for a free agent offer also it's $184 million.
With Jason Hayward.
Yeah. So either one of those teams signing Carlos Correa would be blowing that out of the water. Right. I don't think it's really news that any offer to Correa blows the Twins' total free agent offer out of the water, but it's remarkable that some bigger market teams, Minneapolis and Chicago, are not small cities. There's not small markets, and they have not signed big deals like the rest of these teams.
I don't think Minnesota is the biggest market. Chicago. I think the issue with Chicago is that with the Cubs, they don't know. They know that the ownership's willing to spend this year and maybe next year, but they don't know if they're willing to spend 4, 5, 6 years down the road. So they're scared to put up a big contract and then like have to dump a bunch of salary in 2 years. I think that's kind of the issue there. Like with the ownership and the GM. I think the Cubs situation is a mess, honestly. I mean, but I don't know. You would be able to elaborate more. That's just me from the outside talking. So
it's not the ownership for the Cubs has given the GM the green light per all reports right now, and the GM has not acted.
The key word is right now. He's given them the green light, but
yeah, they're
think
too
the GM
controlling.
Is gun shy. I think they're gun shy that in 3 years the ownership's going to try to slash payroll again, and that you're going to be stuck with. It's going to be a mess again. I think I'm not necessarily saying that that's going to happen. I'm just saying that I think the GM and the front office are gun shy that that's going to happen.
It doesn't make sense. Then it's one of those where you're signing a guy for $20-30 million, $40 million a year. That's not your whole payroll anyway, and the Cubs are losing $80 million off the books after the season.
Yeah.
So,
I'll say that they could just go with the Dave Dombrowski strategy and say, F it, I'm going to be retired by then anyways, so you can't fire me, and I'm going to spend tons of money on players who are going to be bad in 5 years and try to buy a World Series before I retire.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Could give Jason Hayward $184 million and then just sign him to a minor league deal.
Yeah.
Could do that one.
Easy peasy. Cubs are paying him $23 million or something like that this year.
Oh,
and
I forgot.
Dodgers are paying him the league average.
I forgot this was still a year on the Cubs books too because they released
that contract was so bad that the Cubs are now scared to sign anyone to a long-term deal.
Yeah.
I
think he's $22 million and
it wasn't even
the league average.
It wasn't even a bad contract. The outcome is like first percentile of what your expected outcomes would be for Jason Hayward.
A little bit of bad luck.
It would have been better if he had gotten hurt in 2016 and never played over the length of the contract than what he did.
Yep. A little bit of it's poor foresight, and a little bit it's bad luck. It's a little bit of both.
The process was good. There's an article going around from 2016 that was like, the worst case scenario here is the Cubs make out like bandits because he hit what he was expected, and that's a pessimistic outlook. And then the guy forgot how to hit, and you can't figure that out in terms of these free agents, So there's no way Carlos Correa or Dansby Swanson or Carlos Rodon or any of these remaining free agents are that bad. I can tell you that.
We'll just end it on that.
Yeah, let's end it on that. I mean,
let's just end it on that.
Yeah,
but outside of the big remaining free agents, it's really just Correa and Rodon. So if those two, either one of those two sign them in, I guess maybe you could throw Swanson in there. But we'll come back next week with an episode for that one. But if not, I think we're looking at 2 weeks out. Sound good to you guys?
Yep.
Most likely, but with the way
2
things
weeks
have been going,
Christmas,
it'll be
isn't it?
yeah. The way things have been
Christmas
going,
is like a weekend.
the way things have been going, yeah, it's probably going to end up like having 6 free agent signings this week. So
Yeah, I mean, we had 6 today or
Yep.
something like that.
There's
Like,
going
it's
to
something
Dansby
stupid.
Swanson's going to sign. Willie Adames is going to get traded. You're going to have Carlos Correa is going to sign. Like
The Cubs are going to trade Cody Bellinger back to the Dodgers. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.
everybody.
Oh my God.